All right, we're continuing to monitor Donald Trump in Sioux City, Iowa State. He is very confident he can nail down and win, just like he is confident in New Hampshire, very confident that he can do the same, yes, even in Pennsylvania on top of Florida. Again, in those last two states, he trails in the polls, but he is very, very convinced he can turn them around. But something that should worry everybody here are the growing fears that the Russians or somebody, some cybersecurity hacks, could mess with our Election Day voting here. Then, of course, separate reports that ISIS wants to do some violence on Election Day itself. It just adds to the fear around, well, everybody on the final day when Americans gather at the polls. Cybersecurity expert Ira Victor is here. Much we don't know about these latest ISIS threats, much we don't know about these latest cyber threats, but since the latter is more in your wheelbarrow, let me ask you a little bit about how the Russians or any foreign entity could screw up the process, and what would they be able to do? How would they be able to do it?
Oh, Neil, do we have the next hour?
Yeah.
It's so easy, Neil. The systems that have been put into place for voter systems, they are all focused on the machine, on, oh, is this computer safe or not, when the real issue is the human part. It's so easy for someone from a human level to steal the data or to disrupt
like how?
these
in other
systems.
words, the people who largely volunteers who go to these various precincts.
Yeah. I was one of them.
Okay, so how would that be done? How would that be done?
So I was an election manager at a previous election cycle, Neil, and I was in possession of the election machines. They were in the trunk of my car the night before. And incredible as that seems, and during the election, as the election manager, I knew where the machines were, I knew where they were stored, I was there during the election day, and at the end of the election, I was given I was to take the memory cards and put them back in my possession alone and go back to a central place where the cards would be given to the election officials. And they had no idea. They have no idea what happens to those cards.
So this was all electronic voting, right? I mean, there were no paper ballots per se. Wow.
Yes, this is all electronic voting. And contrary to popular opinion, there's a lot of times a paper receipt, but those are, in many states, certainly in my state, they're not allowed to be counted as the vote. It's what's on those memory cards.
And so you could rejigger, obviously, the memory cards, just as you can rejigger and take over a computer. To whatever liking you like, right?
That's right. If I were a criminal, I could do that. I had the opportunity and the means to do it. Now, I didn't do that, but that is just one example. These systems, the focus is always on, oh, this computer is not connected to the internet, and that's what they talk about. It's like a talking point from the election machine company. But the focus is always on this so-called, cyber. We're going to do cyber vulnerability tests. And they don't include the most important element, which is what about the people that are interfacing with, with that equipment?
How would that become obvious to folks that election night then? Let's say a heavy Democratic area that's all of a sudden spitting out Republican votes, or a heavy Republican area that's spitting out Democratic votes. What would draw our attention? What would draw U.S. cybersecurity interest attention?
This is the problem, Neil. We don't, in the systems that I have looked at as an outsider, as the systems that I have looked at, there are no logs. There's no checks and balances to trigger to say, hey, here's a pattern of something not going right. It would just have to be someone looking at it as a human saying, wait a minute, there were so many people that voted for one party versus the other, and the numbers don't add up. But in all the activity that's going on election night, boy, the likelihood of that happening is not very high. So when election officials say, we have not had evidence of tampering, well, where is the mechanism you have in place? Where's the means you have to detect the tampering?
And it wouldn't have to be widespread, right? I mean, it would just be enough to, screw up a county or a precinct that could tip a state and the electoral votes go one way. You wouldn't have to do this nationally at every voting site, right?
You would not. That's right. You can do it as a scalpel sort of attack, just enough in the right precincts in the right states, if the election is close, to turn outcomes differently.
Amazing. Ira, thank you,
Yeah.
I think, but very good read.